Please rise for the national anthem and remain standing for the invocation.
Parade the colors! Present up! Launch. Present. Go.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner
Chaplain Cutchins will now deliver the invocation.
Would you pray with me? Almighty God, creator and sustainer of all things, today we come to you with the deepest gratitude in our hearts for all the gifts you give us each day, for family, loved ones, good friends, laughter, and our careers. Help us always to receive these gifts with thanksgiving, and may our hearts be stirred to remember all of your mercies which we receive through your love towards us. Today we gather and we give special recognition to the spirit that made our country great, a willingness to give totally of ourselves, even unto death. For the great blessing of being a part of this country, we give you thanks. For the joy, beauty, and great examples of courage to our lives, we also give you thanks. You lent them to us for a short time, and we were blessed by the presence of these soldiers, Marines, sailors, and airmen we honor today. And remember, today as we gather and give recognition for all that they meant and gave to us and our country, help us to be ever mindful of all that we still have. It is your strength that enables us to protect others. It is your providence that keeps us safe. Help us to turn our hearts towards you each and every day. We come humbly asking this prayer this morning. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain William Knoll, Commanding Officer, Naval School Explosive Ordnance Disposal.
Good morning, and welcome to the 46th Annual Explosive Ordnance Disposal Memorial Ceremony. Thank you all for being here. I am proud to welcome the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Howard, the Commanding General, U.S. Army Forces Command, General Milley, the Marine Corps' Deputy Commandant for Installations and Logistics, Lieutenant General Faulkner, the Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Installations, and Mission Support, Lieutenant Fetter, along with our many distinguished flag and general officers, civilian dignitaries, and all friends and family of the joint EOD community. This morning, as we have 45 times previously, we will cease operations and training and dedicate ourselves to remembering the 306 heroes whose names are inscribed on this memorial. We welcome back our legacy families and friends, and this morning we honor 8 heroes who will be enshrined, and we welcome their family and friends. We remember. It signifies the very essence and ethos of EOD technicians to never forget the extraordinary efforts of our EOD brothers and sisters who have made the ultimate sacrifice. The EOD Memorial stands as a monument to the courage and commitment exemplified by EOD technicians from all 4 services as they perform the EOD mission. Every EOD soldier, sailor, airman, and Marines takes a solemn oath. We are defenders of the principles that make this country great. We stand as patriots, shielding and protecting the ideals and sentiments of the Constitution of the United States. We bear true faith and allegiance, and we work and live within the codes of military justice. We obey the orders of the President of the United States and the officers appointed over us. These truths are self-evident in the everyday lives of all EOD technicians. From honoring a recent loss to remembering each and every hero of past campaigns, our oath remains steadfast. Distinguished guests, it is my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, a leader of men and women in and out of combat, a highly decorated warrior, and a tremendous supporter of the Joint Service Explosive Ordnance Disposal community. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General William Faulkner.
Thank you for that introduction, Captain Knoll. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor this morning to be here with you and to share some thoughts on this special occasion. Admiral Howard, General Milley, Lieutenant General Fetter, Mayor Wise, Mayor Anderson, other general and flag officers, as well as so many distinguished guests, thank you all for coming. I would also thank the explosive ordnance disposal technicians, past and present, who are with us here today. Your legacy has helped make this a nationally recognized event that justifiably recognizes the heroism that this community has continued to portray for so many years. Additionally, I'd like to thank the EOD Warrior Foundation for the great work you've done in supporting these and other EOD families year after year, long after public recognition has faded. Most importantly, though, I wish to honor and direct my comments this morning to the families of the fallen who have come here to commemorate the lives of their brave loved ones. One of my many roles as Deputy Commandant in the Marine Corps for Installations and Logistics is serving as the functional advocate for the EOD occupational field. I was fortunate to have attended this same memorial in 2013 with our then Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Amos. I'm honored to return this year and participate in this memorial today while representing our current Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Joseph Dunford, Jr. General Dunford frequently reminds our Marines not to rest on our laurels, and no community understands that challenge more than the EOD community. EOD personnel are globally deployed, supporting operations around the clock. EOD technicians don't have the luxury to turn down a mission or to pass the task to someone else. They're always on watch to ensure our servicemen and women are secure. Some have referred to EOD technicians as national treasures, and I would agree with that sentiment. I've served with EOD personnel across all services for much of my career, to include combat operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I'm continually impressed with the routine and regular valor they display during conflict as well as during peacetime operations. America's EOD technicians are smart, brave, tough professionals who are confident, capable, and unassuming. All military servicemen and women face danger, but no community routinely goes in harm's way as consistently as our EOD technicians. Each time EOD technicians are called, 3 factors ring true. First, they go into the mission with complete knowledge that they will face danger. Secondly, they courageously assume risk to take care of other servicemen and women. And then thirdly, they will exhaust every means to accomplish the mission. I'm convinced that there is no more challenging and courageous occupational field across all our services than the EOD occupational field. EOD technicians in the community is unique with a military culture due to its identity and fidelity to one another, as well as the significant inter-service bonds that the community has cultivated through deep trust earned in conflict. Together, jointly, EOD technicians team up on the roads, in the villages, in the cities, or wherever adversaries attempt to take people's lives or to cause destruction to the fabric that holds our values together. This trust and teamwork that makes EOD technicians unique is paved by the 300 names on this wall this morning and the additional 8 that we're getting ready to add. But the EOD community does more than just work together. They fight together, they play together, they bleed together, and sometimes, unfortunately, They make the ultimate sacrifice for our country together. It would be right to say that the EOD community is really more than just a community. They're a family. And this representation here this morning bears that out. Their strong bonds of fidelity last well after the years of service. The large number of former and retired EOD personnel is a testament to the shared camaraderie that goes beyond their individual years of service. Family members really bear the true burden when a loved one, an EOD loved one, takes the long walk. Our nation's responsibilities do not end following memorial services such as this. We owe each of our fallen warriors more than just a debt of gratitude. We are honor-bound to keep the faith with their families. During his second inaugural address, President Lincoln said, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up our nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to all which may achieve and share us a just and lasting peace among ourselves with all nations." This morning, on these hallowed grounds, as we gather before this EOD Memorial Wall, the EOD community exemplifies what Abraham Lincoln said in 1865. You particularly represent the resiliency of the EOD family and the meaning of your motto, "We remember." We remember and honor a soldier from Afghanistan this morning, and from the World War II era, 4 soldiers, a Marine, and a sailor. You've heard me refer to faithfulness in my remarks this morning. The motto of the Marine Corps is Semper Fidelis. It's Latin for always faithful. The EOD community is indeed faithful. Faithful to remember the fallen, faithful to care for their families, and faithful to ensure that every future generation of EOD warriors is well trained and well led and never forgotten. To you who so proudly wear the explosive ordnance disposal insignia, you stand shoulder to shoulder with the most courageous men and women in our nation's history. Thank you for what you have given and for what you continue to give. You embody all that is honorable and good about the American spirit. I'm honored to walk among you and to share in commemoration in memory of our explosive ordnance disposal warriors. We must always remember. Thank you very much.
Service detail, post!
We will now place a wreath in front of each cenotaph while the names of the fallen are read. Representing the United States Army are Captain Razan and First Sergeant McDuffie.
Army EOD technicians killed during military operations are First Lieutenant William W. Ferris, Jr., First Lieutenant John A. Randall, Second Lieutenant Robert B. Roger, Technical Sergeant Harry F. Rapp, Staff Sergeant Edwin T. Walker, First Lieutenant Delafield H. Wickoff, Sergeant Carl E. Christensen, Private First Class John J. Gotti. First Lieutenant Frank E. Smith, Jr. Sergeant Alfred F. Sanders. Sergeant John Blasco. Sergeant Dominic L. Albanese. Sergeant Carmine C. Nicastro. First Lieutenant William J. Brodish. Technical Sergeant William C. Tate. First Lieutenant Bertram Ostro. Corporal Alwyn H. Scarda. First Lieutenant Sherwood L. Racy. Second Lieutenant Charles F. Hale. Technician 5th Grade Robert F. Chapman. Technician 5th Grade Donald E. Bailey. Technician 5th Grade Russell F. Byington. Technical Sergeant Stephen H. Motvey. Captain George W. Collins. Technician 5th Grade Frank L. Dickinson. Captain Robert S. Abbott, Jr. Technician 5th Grade Donald W. Vickers. Technician 5th Grade Joseph F. Fideli. Technical Sergeant Jack B. Duddy. Sergeant Homer M. Bear. Captain George C. Sorrow. Second Lieutenant Arthur J. Zelmer. Technical Sergeant Francis H. Zern. Technician 5th Grade Raymond J. Rondo. Technician 5th Grade Elmer J. Craddock. Sergeant Roland H. Enwall. Captain Raymond L. Battershell. First Lieutenant Earl M. Hamilton. Technician 5th Grade George H. Beggs. Technician 5th Grade Harry Pollock. Captain Richard A. Metris. Technical Sergeant Howard A. Leith. Technician 5th Grade William J. Hackett. Technician 5th Grade Anthony Piergrossi. Captain Samuel R. Brow, Jr. Technician 5th Grade Clinton E. Gear. Technician 5th Grade John Becky. Technician 5th Grade Walter E. Louthen. Technical Sergeant Leonard P. Altick. First Lieutenant Leonard K. Tunderman. Second Lieutenant Benjamin G. Hussey. Private Jack V. Austin. Corporal Lawrence G. Yost. Master Sergeant John F. Faulkner. Private Charles A. Jones. Private First Class Harold L. Sloppy. Master Sergeant Norman R. Durfee. Master Sergeant Frank R. Holly. Master Sergeant Albert J. Barron. Captain Carl W. Johnson. Sergeant First Class Ralph W. Poole. Corporal Robert J. Roberge. Private Michael A. Castagliola. Sergeant First Class Richard R. Knox. Specialist 5 Betuel A. Perez. First Lieutenant Richard R. Diegert. Specialist 5 Paul W. Rice. Specialist 4 Jerry W. Corcoran. Specialist 6 Fred M. Kudis, Jr. Master Sergeant Charles L. Robbins. Specialist 6 Leon Nelson. Specialist 6 Paul B. McKinley. Specialist 5 Melbourne D. Moore. Sergeant Major Donald E. Calhoun. Captain George A. Fisher. Sergeant First Class Charles O. Baker III. Master Sergeant Donald E. Brosius. Specialist 6 Louis D. Black. Captain Briggs K. Cecilia. Staff Sergeant Jerry E. Keckel. Staff Sergeant Robert A. Whitted, Sr. Staff Sergeant Rodney G. Jondro. Staff Sergeant Lewis Payne, Sr. Master Sergeant Jackie W. Barnwell. Master Sergeant James E. Austin. Captain Gary J. Guest. Captain James W. Peterson. Master Sergeant Edward W. Metcalf. Specialist 5, Harry D. McWhinney, Jr. Staff Sergeant Roy Phillips. Specialist 4, Daniel E. Helton. Sergeant Major Kenneth R. Foster. Staff Sergeant Christopher J. O'Reilly, Jr. Staff Sergeant Nancy A. Ozakowski. Specialist 5, Ronald L. Kostenbader. Specialist 4, Joseph J. Tripati. First Lieutenant Michael M. Cocken. Sergeant First Class John R. Wasco. Staff Sergeant Lawrence D. Herman. Staff Sergeant Kevin F. Schaefer. Major Thomas M. Zugner. Staff Sergeant Ricky L. Bunch. Sergeant First Class Donald L. Murphy. Specialist Ross A. Deerking. Staff Sergeant Richard N. Boudreau II. Sergeant Philip M. Fraley. Specialist Jason D. Wildfong. Staff Sergeant Adam T. Harding. Staff Sergeant Brian T. Craig. Staff Sergeant Justin J. Galuski. Sergeant Jamie O. Moggins. Staff Sergeant Joseph E. Robsky, Jr. Staff Sergeant Kimberly A. Voles. Staff Sergeant Michael J. Sutter. Staff Sergeant Richard P. Ramey. Sergeant Elijah Taiwa Wong. Corporal Corey M. Hewitt. Staff Sergeant Christopher L. Shepard. Staff Sergeant Eric M. Stephanie. Staff Sergeant Daniel G. Gresham. Staff Sergeant Russell J. Verdugo. Staff Sergeant Johnny V. Mason. Sergeant First Class Kevin P. Jessen. Sergeant First Class Scott R. Smith. Staff Sergeant Joshua P. Matero. Command Sergeant Major Jonathan M. Langford, Sr. Staff Sergeant James K. Healy. Sergeant First Class Lawrence D. Azell. Staff Sergeant Brian E. Studer. Staff Sergeant Edmund L. Lowe. Staff Sergeant Thomas D. Rabjohn. Staff Sergeant Shane S. Barnard. Specialist Wade A. Slack. Staff Sergeant Matthew J. West. Staff Sergeant Derek J. Farley. Captain Jason T. McMahon. Staff Sergeant Chauncey R. Mays. Specialist Christopher G. Stark. Staff Sergeant Mark C. Wells. Staff Sergeant Eric S. Trueblood. Staff Sergeant Michael J. Garcia. Staff Sergeant Israel P. Nuanis. Staff Sergeant Eric S. Holman. Staff Sergeant Jonathan P. Schmidt. Staff Sergeant Kenneth W. Bennett. Staff Sergeant Nicholas J. Reed. Sergeant First Class Jeffrey C. Baker. Staff Sergeant Joshua J. Bowden. This year, we will be honoring and placing the names of the following Army EOD technicians on the memorial. Private First Class Lawrence C. Pastrud. Sergeant Ira D. Wiggins. Captain Frederick H. Dillon. First Lieutenant Stephen Todorovich. Specialist Justin R. Helton. We remember.
Extensive research identified no living next of kin for First Lieutenant Todorovich and Sergeant Wiggins. Flags for First Lieutenant Todorovich and Sergeant Wiggins will be delivered to their home of record, Veterans of Foreign Wars Post. General Milley and Brigadier General Burton will now present flags which have been flown over the EOD Memorial to the families of the fallen soldiers. Representing the United States Marine Corps are Major Smith and Master Gunnery Sergeant Williams. Marine EOD technicians killed during military operations are Second Lieutenant Leslie C. Blakesley, First Lieutenant Beryl L. Redger, Technical Sergeant John J. Moling, Technical Sergeant Paul E. Meister, Staff Sergeant John M. Spuddick, Corporal Marshall E. Bennett, Staff Sergeant Robert E. Morris, First Lieutenant Alan M. Harris, Captain Ben C. Porter, Sergeant John O. Bird, Sergeant Howard R. Stahala, First Lieutenant Gilbert L. Brown, Master Sergeant George E. Buck, Jr., Sergeant Jesus R. Vasquez, Staff Sergeant Gene F. Morrison, Captain James W. Jones, Chief Warrant Officer 4, William L. Vick, Staff Sergeant John R. Beck, Captain Marvin Cook, Jr., Staff Sergeant Clarence E. Fetty, Staff Sergeant James S. Parshall, Staff Sergeant Richard L. Shryock, Sergeant James H. Underwood, Staff Sergeant Alan H. Soyford, Sergeant Michael C. Matoni, Captain William C. Burmeister, Staff Sergeant Roy W. Burt, Staff Sergeant Robert T. Calloway, Staff Sergeant William C. Dane, Gunnery Sergeant Michael J. Clark, Staff Sergeant Jason A. Lato, Staff Sergeant Joel P. Dameron, Staff Sergeant Daniel A. Tsu, Gunnery Sergeant Darrell W. Boatman, Master Sergeant Brett E. Angus, Staff Sergeant Kenneth B. Pospisil, Gunnery Sergeant Justin R. Martoni, Gunnery Sergeant John D. Fry, Sergeant Justin L. Noyes, Sergeant John P. Phillips, Staff Sergeant Dwayne E. Williams, Sergeant Justin T. Walsh, Staff Sergeant Dustin M. Gould, Staff Sergeant William J. Callahan, Staff Sergeant Peter Woodall, Staff Sergeant Stephen J. Wilson, Sergeant Sean P. Martin, Sergeant Michael E. Toyatow, Staff Sergeant Christopher D. Strickland, Staff Sergeant Daniel L. Hansen, Gunnery Sergeant John H. Roy III, Staff Sergeant Mark A. Wojciechowski, Chief Warrant Officer 2, Ricky L. Richardson, Gunnery Sergeant David S. Spicer, Master Sergeant Adam F. Benjamin, Staff Sergeant Aaron J. Taylor, Gunnery Sergeant Christopher W. Eckert. Staff Sergeant Adam L. Perkins. Gunnery Sergeant Christopher L. Eastman. Master Sergeant Daniel L. Fetter. Gunnery Sergeant Floyd E. Holly. Staff Sergeant Joshua J. Collins. Staff Sergeant Jordan B. Emmerich. Sergeant Jason T. Smith. Gunnery Sergeant Justin E. Schmalstig. Sergeant David P. Day. Gunnery Sergeant Ralph E.J. Pate, Jr. Sergeant Daniel J. Patron. Staff Sergeant Nicholas A. Sprotzoff. Staff Sergeant Stephen J. Dunning. Staff Sergeant Joseph DeAugustine. Staff Sergeant Joseph H. Fankhauser. Sergeant John P. Hewling. Staff Sergeant Sky Moat. Gunnery Sergeant Gregory J. Mullins. Staff Sergeant Matthew R. Marsh. Staff Sergeant Eric W. Summers. Sergeant Miguel Ortiz. This year, we will be honoring and placing the name of the following Marine EOD technician on the memorial: Corporal Clelly C. Whited, Jr. We remember. Lieutenant General Faulkner will now present a flag which has been flown over the EOD Memorial to the family of the fallen Marine. Representing the United States Navy are Lieutenant Commander Keto and Command Master Chief Brower.
Navy EOD technicians killed during military operations are Ensign John M. Howard, Lieutenant Thomas J. E. Crotty, Chief Petty Officer John H. Baldridge, Ensign Harris R. Hester, Ensign George E. Arthur, Petty Officer First Class Thomas B. King, Lieutenant Junior Grade Charles F. Letson, Lieutenant Junior Grade Delbert W. Lewis, Ensign John S. Parker, Jr., Petty Officer Third Class Monroe A. Hudson, Ensign Robert M. Yeager, Chief Warrant Officer 2 Maurice T. Cleary, Ensign James H. Phillips, Ensign Billy M. McCrae, Chief Petty Officer Manuel Gallegos, Ensign Calvin E. Quiche, Lieutenant Stephen C. Plotz, Lieutenant Commander Robert E. Condon, Petty Officer First Class Jerry L. Winningham, Lieutenant Junior Grade Bruce S. McFadden, Petty Officer First Class Richard R. Malady, Chief Warrant Officer 2 Donald V. Roberts, Petty Officer First Class Ralph E. Lew, Jr., Chief Warrant Officer 4 Charles D. Alderman, Lieutenant Donald P. Juneman, Petty Officer First Class Frank E. Morrison, Chief Petty Officer Paul A. Rico, Lieutenant Commander Don A. Hone, Chief Petty Officer Joseph T. Hendricks, Petty Officer Second Class Nicholas Wilson, Petty Officer Second Class Edward A. Coth, Chief Petty Officer Paul J. Darga, Petty Officer Second Class David S. Roddy, Petty Officer First Class Joseph A. McSween, Chief Petty Officer Gregory J. Billiter, Petty Officer Second Class Curtis R. Hall, Petty Officer First Class Jeffrey L. Cheney, Chief Petty Officer Patrick L. Wade, Petty Officer First Class Kevin R. Bewley, Petty Officer First Class Louis A. Sofront, Petty Officer Second Class Tyler J. Trahan, Petty Officer Second Class Tony Randolph, Senior Chief Petty Officer Craig M. K. Vickers, Chief Petty Officer Nicholas H. Knoll, Petty Officer First Class Chad R. Regland, Petty Officer Second Class Taylor J. Gallant, Lieutenant Christopher E. Moscow, Petty Officer First Class Sean P. Carson. This year, we will be honoring and placing the names of the following Navy EOD technicians on the memorial. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alvin E. Vetter, Lieutenant Junior Grade John H. Fessler, we remember.
Admiral Howard will now present a flag which has been flown over the EOD Memorial to the families of the fallen sailors. Representing the United States Air Force are Major Rebick and Chief Master Sergeant Jones.
Air Force EOD technicians killed during military operations are Airman 2nd Class Nelson L. Sanderson, Captain Ernest McFerrin, Technical Sergeant Claude H. Bunch, Technical Sergeant Aaron G. Fidium Jr., Staff Sergeant David L. Hubbard Jr., Staff Sergeant Ralph T. Berry, Technical Sergeant Richard D. Milton, Technical Sergeant James D. Farmer, Senior Master Sergeant Gerald J. Stryzak, Senior Airman Raymond J. Bianchi II, Airman First Class Blaine J. Meyer, Airman First Class Dustin W. Olson, Technical Sergeant Walter M. Moss Jr., Master Sergeant Brad A. Clemens, Captain Kermit O. Evans, Technical Sergeant Timothy R. Weiner, Senior Airman Elizabeth A. Lonke, Senior Airman Daniel B. Miller, Senior Airman William N. Newman, Technical Sergeant Anthony L. Capra, Technical Sergeant Philip A. Myers, Staff Sergeant Brian D. Berkey, Technical Sergeant Anthony C. Campbell Jr., Technical Sergeant Adam K. Gannett, Senior Airman Michael J. Burris, Senior Airman Daniel J. Johnson, Technical Sergeant Christopher M. Soulsby, Staff Sergeant Joseph J. Hamsky, Technical Sergeant Daniel L. Duville, Technical Sergeant Matthew S. Schwartz, Senior Airman Brian R. Bell, Airman First Class Matthew R. Seidler. We remember.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the benediction and remain standing for the 21-gun salute and taps.
Would you once again pray with me? God, grant to the living grace, to the departed rest, to the nation peace. Let us hold fast to that which is good and render to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the needy and the afflicted, and honor all people. Let us love and serve you and our country, Lord. May God's blessing be upon us, our military, and our nation, and remain with us always. Amen.
Retire the colors!
Ladies and gentlemen, please give this year's honoree families a few private moments at the memorial. The ushers will allow the public access once they have finished. This concludes today's memorial ceremony.